It's a weekly bonfire between neighbors, complete with beverages. It's similar to gatherings held in yards across the country, except this one is on the Canada-U.S. border.
He's essential.
With all non-essential travel cut off between the two countries, this is one of the only ways for two remote communities to connect as the sun sets along the border.
A lot of people that don't get to see family, and like the young kids across the border don't get to go to school every day.
For almost 50 years, I've shared a very close relationship with people in Stewart, and I've now been cut off from them.
In this isolated corner of British Columbia, you're likely to pass more bears and glaciers than towns. Right on the border of the Alaskan Panhandle lies Stewart, B.C., population 400. Next door is Hyder, Alaska, with 63 people. It's a far cry from the 10,000 who settled here during the gold rush. These days, there are still mines, and Canadian workers drive through Hyder every day to reach one of them. Everyone else is no longer allowed to cross back and forth.
My foot is soaked.
Not even children to go to school.
See, that's why you go barefoot.
Hilma and Ellie Korpela live in Hyder. They were planning to join their friend Kaylin Carey, a Canadian, in Stewart this year to go to elementary school. The border closures changed that.
I'm really sad because, there's a lot of friends at, over there, and there's barely any in Hyder.
So instead, they've been coming to an area next to the Canadian border station for play dates. The only school in Hyder closed last year, so the Korpelas are being homeschooled.
I don't think it's really fair, because how can we get the COVID? Do we get the COVID from trees or bears? We're like the end of the line.
Just up the hill, residents use the border station parking lot to meet up and drop off food.
Hey, she is taking eggs.
1 dozen eggs is fully fine.
And other necessities.
I have snacks and feminine hygiene products.
Okay. Yeah.
There's no grocery store in Hyder or gas station, so one member from each household is allowed to cross into Stewart each week to run errands. Dick Simpson first came to Hyder in the 1970s.
On our side of the boundary, people are there purely because they like being there.
But they are reliant on the town next door and carry Canadian currency. Every 2 weeks, Simpson comes here to do laundry and pick up groceries.
Sirloin and potatoes.
But he isn't allowed any social calls.
It's tough. Socially, half my friends, more than half my friends, live over here, and so I can't go visit them. So,
For many, that's the toughest part, and Simpson says it's led some to find other ways over the border.
That's been happening for a little over 100 years here. If you look back to our prohibition, there was more than one bottle of Canadian whiskey found its way across that boundary.
But breaking the law today can carry strict consequences, so most follow the rules and are pushing to change them. With winter around the corner and the prospect of more isolation, some believe there's a pressing need to address the border issue here now. They're lobbying Washington, D.C. and Ottawa to have this whole area as its own bubble. Bear bubble! They've staged protests and written letters.
We want to do right by communities.
The MP for the area met with the Minister for Public Safety about relaxing the rules.
This seems like a pretty common sense thing that should be able to be dealt with quite efficiently, and yet it's been well over a month since I met with the minister, and we just haven't seen any progress.
Hyderites were relieved when 3 Canadian logging companies dropped off truckloads of wood to help get them through the winter. People are trying to prepare themselves for the dark, cold months ahead when they could feel even more cut off.
And I have to kind of be prepared for that. I have to put that in my head that quite possibly we'll be isolated for the foreseeable future.
For now, the weekly trips into town are his only physical connection to the world outside Hyder, as a global pandemic and a rigid border separate two linked communities. Briar Stewart, CBC News on the Stewart-Hyder border.